Hi, we're in chapter 4. References. You are in a small building. Light fills the room despite there being no windows. It is silent aside from the sound of your heart beating. Sitting across from you is a mysterious masked figure that definitely is not typing this right now. What do you do? You ask, what are references? The figure doesn't move, but their voice echoes in this small space. References are people who can speak to your character, work responsibilities, and more. They are people you know professionally or personally that you list for an employer. After the words end, you realize how silent it becomes once more. What do you do? You ask, when do I present references? Again it speaks, or does it? The voice feels like it is inside of your head. The employer may ask for them at some point, before or after an interview. Often they are never requested at all. Only a moment of silence passes. If they are requested, provide them in an organized fashion and you need not present more than 3. This time the silence remains. That's a key point, by the way. Don't shove in like 6 references. Let's pretend that you know like a million people at Microsoft or something. Choose specifically 3 or less. 2 is fine. Oftentimes now, references aren't requested at all. That's way more common. You used to list them on your resume, like I said in the resume section. Now you don't. And sometimes they come up, sometimes they don't. Just you're going to want to have some on hand if you can. You run away. There are no exits. As you attempt to move, an unseen force holds you in place. The light of the room dims and the temperature drops a few degrees. The fear that you may never leave this place grips you deep inside, the thought broken suddenly by the voice. There is more for you to know. The walls begin to crack. Only knowledge will set you free of these confines. These words feel true. Professional references are better than personal references, and personal references who are friends are better than personal references who are related to you. The figure continues. Worry not if you have only personal references, as they can still make for good character witnesses. So that always is pretty much the form you want. If you've worked with people or worked around people, or you have people you haven't directly worked with but are industry people who can vouch for your character, that's going to be better than like your mom or your brother. However, if your brother works in the industry, now you've hit that spot where maybe you want to put your brother on there but don't have any other people that you're related to, right? It's going to be a balance. You say, tell me more. The masked figure agrees without motion. Seek individuals who are familiar with your work ethic and character. A professor or a mentor could fill this role. The walls crack further. For professional references, seek only those who have positives to attribute to your performance record. The higher the position they hold, the better. What do? You encourage the figure to continue. Never include anyone as a reference without clearing it with them first. Tell them the type of job you are applying for and highlight the relevant skills which they can mention you possess. The integrity of the walls falters as debris falls to the floor and cool air rushes in. Employers use references to learn more about you and will normally only ask a few simple questions on their experience working with you. What do? You ask, how do I list my references? A storm of laughter fills the room, making you shiver. The voice is now louder than before, setting vibration in your bones. An exquisite question. References should be written out as follows. A distorted piece of parchment appears from the nothingness and hovers before your eyes. Runic patterns form on the rough surface. You don't recognize the language, yet you can read it. 1. Full name. 2. Job title and company name. 3. Contact info, phone number and email, city, state, optional. 4. Description of relationship. Example, are the art lead of my team from 2017 to 2020. The writing fades away and the paper crumbles to dust, setting on the floor. So this is important. it's very basic, right? You're not going to give a book about the reference. You really just want their name, job title, company they're associated with. So, if it's a mentor and they freelance mentorships, you can just say they're, you know, a contractor, or that they're within arts, or you can say that they're a teacher or an art instructor or whatever, and they don't need a company name. Contact info, generally you're not gonna need an address. Oftentimes people only put email. I always put phone number, because sometimes people just want to do a quick call, and if they don't answer, they won't even check again a lot of the times. Your description of the relationship is exactly what it says. They're going to be like, oh, they were the art lead of my team, or they were a coworker on Blizzard project, or, an associate at college, or whatever, that kind of thing. So contextualize it, short and sweet. That's the goal. What do you do? Thank the figure. Your knowledge is not yet complete. There is a growl from behind the mask. Keep the formatting simple and clear. Maintain the same font as your resume in case it is ever requested to submit them together. I've never seen them requested together, but I've heard of it. So let's just assume, should that happen, this would be the method in which you'd want to employ it. Remember always to thank those who offer to be your reference, regardless of whether they are contacted or if you were offered the job. Very important. Clear it with them first. Thank them regardless of what happens. They may never even be contacted. Thank them for offering it. It's just good business. And also, you probably know them. So, don't be a dick. Accept the knowledge into my heart. The walls crack and collapse to the ground. Darkness wells within the crumbled remains, and you begin to sink into the floor, the burden of knowledge weighing heavy on your soul. You can never return to a time you did not understand the depths of delivering professional references. In agreeable bargain, laughter falls distance as the void takes you. Only the Q&A remains. Hey, that was a short chapter. Hope you enjoyed my game. This one's pretty short and sweet, but if you have any questions, now is the time. What sort of questions can you expect if someone contacts you as a reference? So generally, they tend to be personality-wise. So if you worked with them, they'll be like, tell me about working with them. And it's usually open-ended like that. Sometimes they're specific, but more often than not, there are general questions like that, to which you can go, they were really reliable, they were great. If you were a team lead, they didn't run into trouble and really led us to victory as a company, stuff like that. So if there is a specific concern, like let's say your portfolio or whomever's portfolio is really robust, they might call a reference that they've worked with to ask, like, well, how were they with budgeting their time? Because what they're really trying to find out, right, is, are they slow? Because their work is really, really detailed. You know what I mean? And they're kind of looking and hoping that somebody's going to kind of give context to that. The one thing that's weird about references, right, is you're choosing your references. You're not going to provide somebody who hates you. So more than likely, the reference is going to say you're good, even if you weren't. But it's just a formality. It's also kind of why it tends to not be pursued as often as it used to be, at least in areas that I've worked, where you're kind of like, I'm going to call this person who's actually probably a really good buddy of yours, and I'm going to ask them, are you a good worker? And what are they going to say? No? You know what I mean? So it usually tends to be general questions just in case, but it does help to know that there's people out there that are willing to vouch for somebody. Gripe says, are any work positions more valued than others? An example of a management position over HR. That's a good question. So depending, that's going to be painted by the context of the job that's being applied for. So like if you were, let's say you're a concept artist, you're applying for a mid-level position, and one reference is in HR and another reference is in management of an art team, you're going to want the management of the art team person to be your reference over the HR, because it's more related to the work that you do, so they can probably have better insight into that. Like that's like going like, I'm an office worker and I do a lot of paperwork. Do I work with legal or do I work with the mailroom person? It's going to probably be legal because they're going to be overlapping with you a lot more. So also, if you have somebody who's like, oh, they were my coworker on a concept team, and then you have a manager of a concept team, the manager is always going to appear more powerful in a reference sense, right? So that's kind of how you want to do it. But that's why you have up to like 3 slots generally. So you can make your little party members be varied. So if you had HR and a manager, that's pretty good because HR can speak to your character pretty well because that's a lot of their job. And then the manager can talk to your work prowess and to your ability to hit deadlines and so on. And then you can have a nice third option that kind of rounds that out. Chris says, should you avoid references who didn't work with you in the same industry? Like if I needed a third reference for game dev animation, but the only person I could think of is my PC's tech support manager. You can, because they managed you while working on a team. And so that's going to, again, speak to who you were as a worker, what was your attitude like, what was your work ethic like, and that can translate. So I would do that. If you've got 3 and you've got 2 people in your industry and that's a manager that you worked with, that's pretty strong because a manager is less likely to be willing to lie for you if you were a shit. You know what I'm saying? It's not always true, but from the side of a hiring manager, it's likely like, and I've done these calls myself too, that if I were to call that support manager, I can be like, hey, I'm looking at Chris, who's applying for the position of blah, blah, blah. And it looks like you managed him for a little while. How did that work out? Did you feel that he was a good worker? Were there any problems arise? Do you feel that he excelled in any area? And they can go, oh, no, he had a great attitude and he was a really hard worker and it was a joy. I'd work with him again. Cool. Awesome. Perfectly workable. Holding on for if there's any further questions. See, this is why this is good. This isn't like on Twitch or whatever, because then I'd be nervous and I'd be trying to cultivate the timing, but we're able to just kind of chill. Absolutely, Steve. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everybody being here, by the way. And we're still going for a little bit here. Absolutely. We're early and there's 31 chapters. We're not doing all 31 chapters today, but from a freelance artist standpoint, who's worked basically self-employed for a long period of time, who would you recommend they look for as a reference? Industry people that know you as a person and are familiar with your work. So for context of this, I know you, I know your work, and you're part of this artistic community. So if you're looking for a game dev job, you know me, that's an industry veteran, and I could be on your reference sheet because I can talk to your artistic ability and your personality. We haven't worked directly together, but that still makes a decent reference. So you can kind of hop that line. Again, if there's any instructors you've worked with, stuff like that. With freelance, if you're working with like an individual client, that usually doesn't work out as well. But if you've done work for a company, then somebody who worked there, like if there was an outsourcing manager or something, like a good example that I can use is like an outsource manager on Hearthstone. If you're doing a bunch of Hearthstone cards, you could then be like, oh, could I use you as a reference when applying for a studio position because they work at a studio, they've worked directly with you, and they have some experience as to what it's like to kind of edit your work and give feedback, and they can be like, oh yeah, they're a breeze to work with, always turn things in on time. You're just looking for any kind of logical leap you can make from one person and their position to you. So it doesn't have to perfectly overlap. It helps by way of that to network and be in communities with people who are professionally employed in game studios who might be willing to know you and your work well enough to go, I'd recommend that person. Because that's really what you want. People that you've worked with, and if they haven't worked with you, people who can vouch for your character, your ability, and so forth. So like I could speak to your design prowess, I could speak to your personality, I could speak to, how you take feedback and stuff like that. And that's going to be important. Asking corporate clients for references might be viewed as unprofessional. It really depends on your relationship. If you're working, let's say, like you're doing a bunch of illustrations for Riot, then it's not inappropriate to ask your contact if you could use them as a reference. It's okay to reach out and ask. However, it's like an individual client, like somebody who's just got a lot of money that's commissioning you a lot, probably not a good idea, especially in a professional sense. Can you use a previous employer as a reference? Yes. I mean, yeah, of course. All right. We're about to move on. The question isn't for you. We're going to move on in a moment. Just double checking if we aren't getting one more question. Appreciate your patience. This is the part where if this is on YouTube, people get to just like skip ahead 10 seconds while they're waiting for me to shut up. Get what you pay for, man. This is free. Remember to use the question mark emote if you have a question. AIGA, I'm not familiar with that, so I can't speak to that. Did someone ask if a customer could be used as a reference? Are you asking if somebody asked that, or are you asking if a customer could be used as a reference? I would say if you're using freelance, having a customer as a reference is kind of what I mentioned, which is you're going to want to really look at that customer and what are they in a professional capacity. Because if it's like Jim off the street who likes a lot of furry art and buys a lot of furry art, that's not somebody you're going to probably want on your reference, not because of the furry art part, but specifically because they're just an individual who's buying some artwork from a professional. You're looking for a professional reference, and even though they're working with you regularly and you're delivering, if you can get somebody that has a little bit more of a leg in the industry, that's going to do you a lot better. That's why like mentors, instructors, and things like that are going to be a little more useful. All right, we're going to move on.